So looking at a new plot here, and one of the comments that came up in the comments section was, how do you find good green sites, or what makes a good green site? And I think that's a really interesting question, and something I probably should have done earlier in this series. So I thought this would be a good next place to start. This is a new plot. It's been done using the plot generation technique that I've shared before, and the tree line has been copied and pasted as you've seen me do before. I find putting a couple of clusters of trees can work really nicely for giving you some definition, hemming you in a little bit, and can force you to make some creative solutions to problems rather than just rooting over a completely empty plot, which gives you no real sense of scale. Now, green sites, what might we look for? Well, the most obvious ones, first of all, it tends to help your eye if you look into the sun, just because the contours will pop a little bit better. The most obvious ones will be plateau, so like the top of a rise you can see between these two hills here would be a nice one. If you're thinking about the approach, try to visualize what you can see. We're generally looking for flatter spots with some tilt of land to them. This one I'd be envisaging coming right to left and slightly back to front. You can maybe already see a fairway winding in and down here, and this might be your approach. But yeah, top of a hill is usually a pretty good place. You probably wouldn't go really severe and up here because it's just going to fall off from everywhere. So you want somewhere where it's flattish. There's probably a slope. There are some interesting slopes around it that you can play off. But let's take this point and then work off it. Could we put it anywhere else? Well, what about back here? A little bit further back then means, or maybe this mound comes into play. So let's play with that a little bit more. What about if we put it over here? That could work. You've got a bit of a bowl. I think it's really about just analysing the features that you've got in and around it. If you were coming this way, and look at it from different angles. If you're coming it from this way, well, maybe you've got a bit of a punch bowl here. You can see a few flags because I've tentatively marked out a few that we're going to have a look at in a second. Another plateau might be here. I think that's a really nice little green site. Everything funnels in. You can work with that. So plateau is a pretty obvious one. The next one might just be kind of a flat portion of land. And I'll go over here because I haven't done anything on this part of the plot yet. So let's say you've got a flat portion of land. Let's say here. You could put one in. Why does this work? I think this is going to particularly work on a long par 4 or a par 5 because if everything's flat, well, that's allowing people to play any sort of approach. You can play aerial and land it on and stop, or you can bounce it short. With a flat green site where there's relatively minimal mounding, I'm generally looking for some low profile contours that I think can be interesting. So this here could be like a swale at the front. You've got a tiny little dip here that could work. You've got a runoff at the back, so if you approached it from this direction, maybe I'd want a slightly more lofted club because I think it's dropping more here than there. But like flat green sites can be really, really good. I'd try to apply them to that sort of hole. If you're going for a short par 3, say this sort of very flat green site, you're going to have to work much harder to make it sing. So what else have we got? Let's go back to the hills that we had. So we had these sorts of big dunes, and the obvious place tends to be to stick a green just on top of them. And let's say we were having a par 3 from here over to here. Well, that's kind of ready-made, but you don't want to do that again and again and again. So what are your alternatives? Well, maybe coming at that same green site but from one side, so that you're kind of benching the green a bit more into the hill. So let's say here, if you put the green here, or you can put a bunker in here if you're approaching from this side. That's going to be a great green site because this hill gives it a bit more definition. We can really already see a fall off coming this way that's maybe going to run into a swale, and that'll be our big feature that I'd build the entire hole off. Just you want to be in as good a position as possible so that you're not running down that slope. So side hill can be great. What else have we got? Well, I guess bottom of a dune is good. Punch bowls. Like, think about the ways in which you can run the ball and give yourself backstops. So like, let's say we put something down here. Well, we've got that backslope that we can work off of, and you can get some really creative, fun green sites there that might work. In terms of others, really it kind of is either on top of hill, base of hill, side of hill, flat. That's really about it. I guess there's a final one which is like ridge line. So if I'm looking at this bit of land, this is one I really like because I think it's quite subtle. You've got this little ridgeline here that's coming in. Now trying to put a green just on top of that rise, I mean it's the same concept, it's a small hill, but that can really exaggerate the benefits of hitting an approach from the left hand side rather than from the right, where you're having to hit all the way over this little series of small mounds. Kind of like a mixture of the hill and the flat holes or green sites that we've discussed. So we're now going to exit out of the camera mode and you can see what I've put down. So I'm going to clear off these. Now say I think I'm going to, so you've got a flatter green site here, but you can see there's some land movement in and around it, and this one fits nicely because it's par 5. The next one's a kind of mid par 4, and what have we done here? Well, this one's going to need some work. I don't think I've put the pin quite in the right place, but there's this runoff here that I liked, that I felt I could use, and maybe a green somewhere along here. I also quite liked the fact that you had this rise and then a little fall, which might mean that we're having to be precise with distance control because it could run through. I don't know. You're not necessarily going to have all the answers when you start, but you might have some ideas. This one I really liked. It's a flat, straightforward green site, and that can work really nicely for kind of open areas with par 3s. Now in this case, it's lending itself really nicely to an Eden. So a sharp sloping back to front green, and that fits for the length of par 3 because you're going to try to leave the ball below the hole. It's a real test of distance control, and that again fits with the land. Now whenever I'm routing, I'm also looking at tee shots and seeing what do we have that we think works. When I came over this rise, I found for a longish par 5, again I want to be giving you options to bounce the ball in, and I loved the gentle tilt of the land coming from left to right here, and kind of feeling that you've got this big dune over here, which is making me think, oh, I've just got to fade a shot to work it round and run it down, and I just thought that framed itself really nicely. We'd seen 7 before. That was this sort of, I mean, this is the sort of par 3 you dream about. There's just a giant dune, and you could put this green site pretty much anywhere. But I liked that one. I felt that was the flattest area. Then you get to some of the slightly quirkier ones as you come up the dunes, and this one was really just finding corridors through the dunes. Now if I go to this one here, well, there's a big fall off behind the green, which I quite liked. Don't know whether, I still have no idea whether this course would see the light of day, but the next one you've got, again, kind of a plateau. It's not quite on top of the hill, so you'll notice with all of these, they're not at the very top of the dunes, and I think that's generally a good move, though you'll see one in a second that is right on top. But again, there's enough like low profile land movement that we can work off of, and we'll see that happen later. 10 again flows through one of these corridors, and here I felt there was an option to put one pretty much on the top of the dune, because you can get that sort of skyline effect here. But although it's on top of the dune, there's enough flat area that it's not like all falling off. It's a natural high point of the land, but at the same time there's enough flatness there to allow you to have a green. Within that you've then got this sort of thing, so a little kicker slope that will work through, potential of a punch bowl, could move it further left and have that kind of infinity look. That might arguably be even better. But if that's the case, then it's how am I making that, like, oh, I think I do like that better. But then it's how are you making that not too punitive, as if you go long you are dead, which might be okay in 5. Par 3, I mean, sheltered down between the dunes, I really just like the tee shot. The green site is flattish. A lot of them will just stand out to you if you've made the plot well enough. 12 could be anywhere. I put this one low. I mean, there's a great green site just here on one of those sorts of ridge lines that you see. You could put it up here. You could put this one pretty much anywhere. Like that sort of low profile land movement is great, and it's going to depend a bit on holes around it. 13 is a pure plateau, but also kind of banked into this hill. Again, land movement's really cool here. 14, not so sure on. I feel like I've had this sort of green site a lot. It would be very much banked into a dune, but it would feel a bit samey to other par 3s, so that might be one I look at. And as ever with all of the videos I give you, it's like try to think about not pulling the same trick twice. 15's again a flatter, hole, and you can tell we've got the kind of flatter areas of this plot and then the duney areas out here. 16 I thought was lovely, just a really flat, again open look, so we'll try to create a lot of that. 17, don't really know, I think this one's pure transition because I needed to get to 18, which I liked, and 18's this hill kind of ridgeline sort of hole again, where you'll have a green something like this and everything from here just falls away, so you're really trying to hold the left hand side with your tee shot, and we'll probably have some bunkers or tree line or something, but even then the land movement's all going this way. And I guess that's the final point, it's generally work with the land, like whatever the course is doing, if you've set up the plot sensibly enough, then just work off that and go with what common sense would dictate without moving too much earth. So yeah, I hope this one helps give you a couple of ideas of how you can find interesting green sites, things you might want to bear in mind, as well as, like, I guess the important thing for me is looking at the little features as much as you are the big ones. So when I do come down to sculpt some of these greens, which I'm going to do for you in a minute, it will be what can we work off of that's already there rather than kind of creating everything from scratch. I hope this helps, and see you soon.